My name is Shelley Latham. I am the community manager for linkengineering.org, which is an educator exchange for PK through 12 engineering. And it is a project of the National Academy of Engineering with sponsorship from Chevron. And today we are having a conversation with two powerhouses in the realm of STEM education and outreach on family engagement. And I'm really excited to have with us today Linda Kekelis of STEM Next Opportunity Fund and Tara Chklovski from Iridescent. And I, first of all, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm gonna just have you sort of introduce yourselves and explain how you got to where you are and how you decided to focus your talents on STEM and engineering outreach and what you do. So,
Linda, I'm curious to hear your story.
Yeah.
Okay, I was curious to hear yours, but I'm happy to start. So I have to say, family engagement has been like a lifelong passion of mine in the many roles I've had as a parent and an educator, as a researcher, and also as the founder of TechBridge Girls, and now as an advisor with STEM Next. And I'd say it like starts back, gosh, like now it's been probably like over 25 years ago when my son was in preschool in a preschool cooperative. And so since it was a cooperative, I had to go once a week to the preschool and be there on the floor and help support the program. And what really stood out to me in that role was seeing how boys and girls arrived at the door of preschool and kind of went into very different worlds. And my son, walked through the door, and immediately the adults that were on the floor that day directed him to the blocks and the Legos and knew that he liked to build and sent him into the company of a pack of boys to do that stuff. What I noticed was when the girls arrived at the preschool cooperative, parents were making comments about how cute the girls looked, talking about their clothes, about their new shoes, and then kind of directing them to the dress-up area or the puppets or the dolls. And it just seemed like there were such different worlds that the kids were going in. And I knew from my research and the studies that I was doing around gender was that like boys and girls are so much more similar than different. But because they were having such different expectations and opportunities from early on, they were like diverging. And, my son ended up growing into an engineer, and he's an engineer today, and he's done a whole lot with blocks and building. But I thought at that moment there could be so many more girls interested in engineering if we gave them a chance and did something to intervene and kind of help their parents understand. So back in those days, I did do some social engineering and shared research with parents and kind of helped reimagine the setting for the preschool so that the girls got to build and tinker and work with the boys, and just saw that there were lots of opportunities to kind of change the game for girls and boys. Fast forward to TechBridge Girls, I got the chance through our after-school programs to give girls those hands-on opportunities to tinker, to take things apart, try to figure out how things work, and do the things that they weren't necessarily getting to do at home because nobody thought that they would like to do them, and saw how cool it was. And because the girls were doing those things, the parents got to see the girls enjoying engineering and STEM and kind of bust some of the gender stereotypes that they had about their daughters. So now, for me, it's been great when I stepped down from TechBridge Girls to have the chance now through STEM Next Opportunity Fund to really see programs around the country that are on their own personal journeys to get more girls and boys interested in STEM and especially engineering, and involving parents in that role and seeing how many different ways there are to do family engagement. And also better understanding like what are the challenges that hold people back and what can we do to be able to kind of help support people to do more for families. So that's a little bit of my little personal journey into how I got where I am and why family engagement is something that I love. How about you, Tara?
Yeah, so I was born in India, and our family is slightly different because we are Christians, and that's a minority in India. And the advantage there is that actually we grew up speaking English. That was our first language, and there were slightly more sort of westernized in thinking, but my family sort of has been through many ups and downs, and my grandmother actually at the age of 65, she had sort of stayed at home, and I think my grandfather's business was going down. He actually had a big machine shop and a big garage, and she decided that she would take things into her own hands. And so she actually cut down a tree and made 2 chairs, 2 tables, and started a school. And that was actually when the year I was born. So the school is now, I'm 40 years old, and it has 700 kids. But it was a very unusual thing for a woman. And India is a complex society, especially when in the ways it treats women. And so I had her as an incredibly powerful role model. And then my mother is also very unusual. She was a doctor, and once she got married, she stepped out of the workforce. But then due to financial constraints, she had to come back to work. And at that, it's very, very hard to set up your own private practice in India. There's a lot of competition. And so at the age of 43, she actually joined the Indian Army as a doctor. And that was the last year she was actually eligible to do that. And it was just really, really inspiring to see these very powerful women who helped bring financial stability to the family. So I had them as role models. But then my father was a pilot in the Indian Air Force, and and I was the first kid. I have a younger brother, and he always brought me up as a boy. And I think we weren't very financially, I guess, well off, but I did have a very unusual upbringing. So I didn't actually have money for dolls. Barbie dolls are actually pretty expensive. But I grew up fixing engines and playing with engines. And it was just so interesting that you are what sort of our expectations, like the people around you, really shape your interests. And with practice, you become better, and with success, you develop interest. So interest is not something that you magically are born with. And so I grew up, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. They actually allowed women at some point into the Air Force while I was, I think, 15 or so. But I was too short. My legs were like 4 inches too short. And so I was like, okay, I can't do that anymore. So I'll become an aerospace engineer. And so I did physics in my undergrad, and then I came to the United States to do a master's in aerospace. And it was absolutely amazing to come to the United States because I felt freedom for the very first time. In India, I come from a small town of more than 1 million people, but it's a very unsafe place. And I grew up at one point, I think my dad and my younger brother and I, we were going to visit my mom. She was on night duty at a hospital. And we got stopped by a gang. And I was 12 years old. And it was just such a horrific experience that, I had nightmares for until I was like 10 years into the US, when I was like, okay, I'm in a safe place now. Mm-hmm. And so when I came to the United States, I was like, okay, it was an incredible feeling of freedom, but I was so surprised that that there was this very strong gender stereotype. Mm-hmm. And that women, like, with pride say, oh, shopping is my hobby, or oh, I'm bad at math. And of course, in my aerospace engineering department, there are no women. And so I was just very, very surprised, because in India, I thought that US led everything, and societal sort of values were much more advanced. And so that was very sort of strange to me, and it kept nagging me. And then I was in a PhD program, doing aerospace engineering at USC. And I was in it for 5 years. And I wanted to work, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to work in this company called AeroVironment. They make really amazing, innovative airplanes. They made the first drones. They made the first solar-powered airplane. And I got to work there, but they really went the defense contractor route. And so I felt that that was really not what I wanted to do. And at that time, the aerospace industry wasn't the startup, thriving industry that it is now, where there you can, if you have an idea, you can build something. And so that was very surprising to me, that because for 20, or not 20, but like 10 years, I had put my path to working there. And then when I'm like, okay, maybe I don't want to work here, it's like the ground shifted from underneath me. And so I'm like, I don't want to finish my PhD because I don't want to work in the aerospace industry. So what do I do? And so I sat down and I looked at like, what were the really big problems in the world? And I looked at what my strengths were. And my strengths are basically just one I put down was like motivating people to do hard things. And on the other side, education really came up as a big one, and especially education for girls, because it's such a force multiplier, and women. And so I started Iridescent, and the idea is that engineers and scientists and industry professionals have so much to model, but they need to work in close collaboration with parents, because parents are the main decision makers for children. And you have to start very early. So all of it, I did like years and years of research to figure out like the core model. And it cannot be, oh, you're only going to do an after school program for kids, because they have no agency. What happens after the program is done? What happens after they move away from that area? So what happens after your grant is done? And so you really have to have a systemic approach, and it's overwhelming to think about how much you need to do, but there's no band-aid solution. And so the idea is that we really want to train the parents to change the way they interact with their daughters. And so we have two different programs, the AI Family Challenge and the Technovation Challenge. And both are to find a problem in your community and use engineering and technology tools as a family or as a team to do that. So that's where we are. That was a very long intro.
You know, I think one thing that really stood out with me is the whole notion about like people having expectation. And it sounds like for you, Tara, like people, and like you said, your dad wasn't thinking like, oh, you can't do this. And like, he wasn't saving things for his son to do in a way that seems to happen here a lot more.
Everywhere.
And, you know, and it's not like parents are trying to like hold their girls back and they're unconscious. So I think for me, what kind of empowered me with TechBridge Girls was kind of realizing that, you know, by having conversations with parents and helping them to see what their girls are interested in doing or can do, and what they can do with their daughters, they can make a big difference. Because oftentimes it was like this aha moment for parents. You know, I know with one of our programs, we had a unit around cars and engines. And so girls got to look under the hood, kind of do some car maintenance, learn about 4-stroke engines, build a model. And I know, a dad came during that series and said, oh my gosh, you know, I never thought Esmeralda, you know, his daughter would be interested in that. And these were always the kind of activities he did with his son. So it was just like stepping back for a moment and thinking like, you know, next time, you know, I'm going to involve her in this sort of thing. So it's just helping more parents kind of understand that. And, you know, just realizing like, okay, when you're buying Christmas presents, it's like, get those power tools for your daughter. You know, she likes to do that. You know, we had some parents who had twins and like a boy and a girl. And like, you know, whenever there was a problem with the computer, the dad said, you know, my default was always just going to my son. And suddenly it's like realizing, well, you know, wait a minute, you know, my daughter's interested and capable. So I think it is always kind of like pushing the boundaries and helping parents see what they can do and helping encourage them to get their girls more involved in engineering. And I really appreciated your comment about like how people feel okay about saying like, oh, I'm not good at math, or, you know, kind of being fearful. And I've been involved in observing some mother-daughter maker programs, and the mothers would say to me like, oh, with homework or when problems came up that involved technology or math, you know, I was always telling my daughters, go to your father. And, you know, suddenly they realize, well, what is that message communicating about females in those subjects, and helping empower the mothers to feel more confident and comfortable engaging in those so that they could be better role models for their daughters.
Hmm. The cars course sounds really cool. How did you go about doing that, and who came and taught it? And
Our staff did. At the time when we were coming up, every summer we'd come up with new curriculum ideas and our staff would develop it. And at the time, this woman, Erica Rios, said, I want to do something that's like really fun and different. She goes, I want to do cars and engines. And it's like, okay. And so she developed the curriculum. So it was literally getting under the hood of our staff's car and kind of like, studying the parts and doing a little bit of work with it. And then actually there were some model kits for 4-stroke engines. So the girls actually built their own. And then we actually also got on Craigslist and got used lawnmower engines. And the girls got to take them apart and then reassemble them. So it was a lot of hands-on experience. And the girls, I mean, it was like probably one of the most empowering activities for the girls because it was just something that they so didn't get to do usually in their day-to-day lives. So
I mean, even adults don't get to do it, right? So I think it's a generally, it's like the bicycle mechanics
yes.
class, right? Like it's a huge, yeah, I think I've been running a local family club, and it's just so interesting that even highly educated mothers, everybody has this fear like, oh, I don't code or I don't program. Right. And then I'm like, it's okay, just come and play with I mean, you're going to do this. And at the end, they're like, I learned so much, right? Like I can code Python. Like somebody needs to show you how to do it, and then you build your own for the adults. I think one of the things we have found that parenting is so intense, and life sort of schedules and like schools are so intense that many times you don't even stop to think that what you're doing is not probably correct, right? And I think the schools, like, I see sort of some trends, right? Like the growth mindset was a huge sort of step forward. And then I think the social emotional learning is a big step forward, I feel. Like this whole thing around empathy, right? That is so valuable. But I think maybe there is room for training for parents around unconscious bias, and especially, and to make it a very formal, here's your toolkit, right? And like give them actual like tip sheets, because otherwise you have to make the whole connection, right? And just sit down and really think about how are you interacting and why.
Mm-hmm. And that was something I was so impressed with, seeing some of your recent work, that you actually developed like a little handout guidebook for parents around growth mindset, because I feel like there's so much research that is so important and valuable for families to have, but usually it's like, academic and very inaccessible to families. And it's like, one thinking about like, how do you share it? And then how do you share it in ways that's really accessible? Because I know like at one point with TechBridge Girls, it was like, I mean, like I'm a huge research junkie and I just always love reading research, but then it's figuring out like, how do you share it? And more than just like being like the teacher and like giving it to parents, but really involving them with it. So, one of the programs that I saw that I thought was so good at it was Digital Youth Divas, because they had been involved with Bridget Barron and her work around family roles and technology. And so what they said was that like, we don't want to just hold that research and use it to design our program, but we want our families to like really dig in and work with it. So they like wrote up simple summaries of those roles, and the parents would sit around tables together and like read about it and kind of identify like which were the roles and what were real things that they were doing with those roles, so other parents could hear, and then parents would learn from each other. So it was like such a like dynamic and engaging way of involving all kinds of different parents with that research, which I thought was like really like interesting.
Yeah. I think we do these, the parent workbook is great, but again, like where do you have time to sort of read? And so what we have found is very effective is doing these family evening sessions. When you provide dinner, you bring the whole family, you build things, but it could also sort of be a launch festival, and then you have you split the children off and you have them sort of do some activity. So then the cost of this thing becomes high on a practical level, but let the parents have like at least an hour, and you do role play exactly like and then let them have some time to think about these issues. We actually did a very interesting research project with the NIH around working with low-income Hispanic parents who had more than one child with autism. And the idea was we would communicate research around autism to these families because they are completely cut off from any kind of research. And so it was an interesting study where there were 3 modes of communicating. One was where we had a trained researcher who went through our training to communicate and run a discussion on here's the research and how is it saying, what is it saying. Second was where a local facilitator would just facilitate a discussion on that paper. And these were research briefs that we wrote up in 4th grade language. And then the third was just a translation and a recording of the research brief. And interestingly, the one where the facilitator facilitated the discussion was a really good one. And that where the engagement was high, which was interesting to us because we thought maybe the scientists leading it would be more effective. But it's again this part of like not having like a power play, but just open up the discussion and give time. So
tell me more. Who were those local facilitators and like?
Oh, I forget it. This was in LA. It was a very well-respected community partner, and they had their staff and the community partner. So these are very low-income Hispanic families that have 2 or 3 children with autism, and they're really struggling. And so, but they have a very strong relationship with this community organization. So
okay, so right. So it sounds like that organization of facilitators like really knew the families.
Yes.
Knew how to support them. You know, something that I hear sometimes when I'm talking with different groups around family engagement, especially those that might not have had great success to the present time, and then, you know, often feel like, oh, our families just don't have time or don't come. I know that you've worked with lots of diverse groups and have worked in under-resourced communities. So I'd love you to kind of share like some of your insights in terms of like, how do you really promote equity and access and get families to come?
I mean, I think coming at it more from like what makes us similar rather than dissimilar, because many times these conversations get a little bit sidetracked, in my opinion, around ethnicity and culture, because most parents want a better future for their child and really coming at it from that point of view. And then there are some basic human drives, right? Like you all need to eat, you all need to rest and sleep and not be stressed. And so providing dinner is like the most important thing. And it's so basic that sometimes you can have this sort of Ferrari of a program and you miss this very basic part. I think that was one. And then, but as we have scaled across, we operate in 115 different countries, and it's been really interesting to see sort of the challenges. And I think we're becoming more and more nuanced in trying to understand how can we make this process of recruiting families more efficient. And there's a group from CMU that CMU and Cornell that has been doing quite a bit of work around game theory and trying to figure out how can you apply it in social settings. And so one example is there's a nonprofit in LA where they were trying to educate homeless youth around basically HIV and AIDS prevention. And so they were trying to figure out who is the main influencer that we should connect with and educate first, so that this would spread much faster than normal. Mm-hmm. And it was actually quite different from what the nonprofit thought would be the influencer. Mm-hmm. And so that to me is very intriguing and is an area for exploration where, yes, maybe the parent who is the most sort of active from the school's point of view is probably not the influencer in the community. And so can we be much more, much smarter basically at trying to figure out these influencers? Who should we invite for the first session so that the word can spread quickly to come for the following sessions? So that is an area of improvement. And then there's a really big study done in around like 7,000 parents in the UK around parental engagement for early childhood prevention interventions. And one interesting insight was that if a family has had prior success or a prior good experience with an intervention, then they're more likely to seek help, which is obvious, but you don't think about that when you're trying to run a program. And so basically what that means on a practical level is if there's another organization or another program, could even be something like a nutrition program or I don't know, then try to recruit those families. And so you can, instead of going third grade, fourth grade, whatever it is. So I think these are tactics, but there's a lot of room for improvement.
And you don't those things because thinking about developing a STEM program for families, you would never be thinking about going to a program and organization that's like nutrition or somehow not specific to the subject area. And I want to go back to your comment too about meals, because again, it sounds like simple and it's like, oh, it's just food, but it's so much more than just feeding the families or like helping them get to the program during dinner time. It's like all about like what goes on during meals and building the community and helping families feel more comfortable in order to step into doing a program. And I know, like I had shared before, that there was a program out of Lawrence Hall of Science doing family math, and they found when they talked with parents was that parents were saying like, you know, a particular group of families said, I don't feel comfortable just coming and immediately doing your math programs and activities. I don't have that confidence or comfort level in things. We wanted to get help bridge them, then make them feel comfortable to and I know sometimes like you don't budget for meals or you don't budget for childcare, and you know those could be barriers that you know keep some families from being able to engage.
Yeah, I think all of these are issues at scale, right? And how do you work out the budget? And I think over time, we've learned that yes, you have to think even beyond post 1 year, and usually grants are for 1 year, right? And so we've begun to use this metric of a partner acquisition cost, really, because it takes so much work to go into a community and then to build trust. And then the grant is over that first year. And now what? The grant funder wants you to go to a different area. And then that momentum has been lost. And so what we have found, like a rough ballpark, is it takes about 3 years to sort of build trust in a community, and you've built enough sort of human capital in terms of their training and awareness. And so you cannot even expect costs to go down that dramatically for second, third year. But then following that, we need to be more mindful of sort of bringing in local funding, local resources, and to help the program be sustainable. Otherwise, you're just jumping from place to place to place based on your grants. And the logistical costs add up, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point for us to be able to really amplify with funders to help them realize, like, you know, especially for something that's as important as family engagement, where you're building trust and relationships and you don't want to just come and go from a community, that they need to understand that it does take time and how important that is. And I think your point in terms of sustainability is really important to think about that from the very beginning, because I know even when we get 3-year grants or 5-year grants, often like the whole focus early on is on running the program.
Yep.
It's not until that last year that you start to think about sustainability, and it's so important from the start to really be thinking about sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's just mental cognitive load on the organization's part, but it just has to be, I mean, I think with maturity, you are able to handle that load, but it's just such an important part to keep in mind. Linda, I am curious, like what were some of the sort of big pain points when you were at TechBridge, or like some, because I feel that I was just thinking this morning, like there have been so many big mistakes that I guess I would not, now I'm advising another person to start a nonprofit, and so many things that I wouldn't do. And so I'm kind of curious what your experience has been.
A couple of mine that, as I was like reflecting on this, like one was like not trying to be too perfect. And I'll give a specific example around this. Like we heard early on when the parents said, like, we want to know more about what's going on in the program so that we can support our girls, and like at the end of a program we can talk about what she did that day and know how to find things, you know, going on in the community and ways to support her. And so what we decided to do was kind of develop newsletters, but like we probably me, wanted things to be like looking good and being perfect and being real well written and like being like designed well, that this ended up becoming a really labored long process. So parents weren't getting updates in a timely way like they wanted. And it just took so much time and money. And, you know, in retrospect, what I realized from hearing from other organizations is that just do something really fast and simple, like, you know, at the end of the session every week, have your program staff, you know, send a quick email or a text and say like, you know, the girls were doing this. Here's like 3 questions you might ask to help like encourage some discussion around the dinner table. And then here's like, you know, a book or something online you might be able to follow up on. And I've seen like, you know, an organization being really nimble in doing that. And, you know, I just thought like, oh my God, like I put my staff through a really horrible process about like trying to review and edit and get everything perfect. And in the end, it just didn't work. So it was like a big waste of time. I guess another kind of failure and lesson learned was don't assume things. Like, you know, you might discover with parents what a problem or a challenge is. And then one of ours was figuring out like, how did we get more families to come and support their daughters in our summer program? And we were finding that the girls that had the most opportunities and advantage and were doing a whole lot of summer programs were also coming to our Tech Bridge Girls Summer Program. And then there were some girls that weren't doing anything in the summer. And we thought we really want those girls and families to engage. So we had heard some comments about transportation was a challenge. So then on our own, we kind of designed what we thought was the solution and hooked up with the family shuttle service and made it available for free to families. And lo and behold, nobody did it. And so it was like, whoa, you know, we didn't talk with the parents to really find out, was that what they wanted? So it was like stepping back and realizing, let's get around the table when we have got things that we want to work on and really find out from families what they want and need and not be making those sorts of assumptions.
So what did they need?
It was at a point where I left. So I don't exactly know. You know, I think some of the things might have been like kind of helping support families to engage in this like as a group. So when girls were coming from a school, about connecting with the school and the group of families there, to have a whole group of them being able to kind of as a posse be able to participate in the program, as opposed to kind of families and girls on their own engaging or doing it at a school, and just talking more with families about like, you know, the importance of summer learning and summer learning loss, and talking about, you know, why it's more than just like filling time, but it's so important for kids to do things in the summer. And then seeing like, is there childcare issues or other kind of things that we didn't know about that were restrictions on the children.
Mm-hmm. And did you do any focus groups with parents? Like, how did you like? And I mean, that's something that I've been very curious about. Like, on one end, you have like hardcore researchers doing ethnography kind of stuff, right? And then I'm curious to also hear like, what do nonprofits do in a nimble, like quick way, and what worked for you?
We did a little bit of both because we were lucky in some ways, and it was like a huge gift and opportunity that we had like many NSF grants that afforded us the chance to have researchers help support us with, you know, evaluation and focus groups and interviews. But in between those, you know, I just like was so committed to research that even when we weren't funded for that, we made sure that every year we continued to do interviews and focus groups with families to find out what they were thinking and understanding things that we didn't know about. And sometimes like learned really interesting things in terms of, one example is like, you know, we were talking with girls about their future and what they wanted to be. And the girls were saying like, oh, I want to know more about STEM careers, or I met this great role model who's in mechanical engineering. How do I follow her path? And, you know, my parents say like, they're happy with whatever I want to be. But the girls said, I want more support or more direct guidance from my parents. And when we talked with the parents, they were saying like, oh, it's too young to be talking about careers with that girls. We don't want to, you know, narrow their options or make them think they have to become an engineer. So just realizing there was a huge divide and disconnect between, you know, what each other was thinking. And it really could help the parents understand what their girls wanted and needed. But also what I found was often very informative was really having a lot of informal conversations and short talk times with parents and just being there. So like parents would like share little things with me that like would kind of blow my mind and like would be those lessons that would stand with me forever. So
Like what?
you know, one time, for example, we had a program where the girls were learning about design of exhibits at Chabot Space and Science Center. So on the weekends, they came up there and spent time working on exhibit design and learning how to do research and interview people around it. And one of the girls' dads brought her up to the museum for this. And then he talked to me a little bit after he dropped her off and said, oh my gosh, you know, I feel so terrible that I can't do much to help her. And he just felt like he was worthless. And he said, you know, I can't speak English very well. I haven't gone to college. I don't know technology or engineering. You know, he was working in a Chinese restaurant in Oakland, Chinatown. And it was like, here he was either taking time off from work or rearranging a schedule to get her up there. And it was like, that's what counts. So it's like suddenly realizing like helping parents like him know that what they were already doing
Right.
like so important, and just empowering them, like don't feel bad that you're not like you are doing what it takes. So
Yeah, you know, I think from my side, I think there were two really big things that we messed up on, and one was we asked parents if, like, we do a 5-week family science program, and we asked everybody would say we want to do more of that at home. So then we did a big survey with 1,400 parents, and we asked them what kind of platform or technology would they like. And they listed all these features, right? Like connect with mentors, watch videos and all of that. So we created this like big, heavy curiosity machine platform. I think by now, I don't know how many millions we've invested, like maybe 10 million into the content, the platform and everything. And families don't use it. And so I think, and then a big part of it has been us connecting with the families and saying, did you do this at home? Did you do this at home? Did you do an activity at home?
mm-hmm.
And now I'm realizing that that is the wrong question to ask, because you just end up feeling bad and guilty.
Yeah.
Right. And that, oh, I didn't do that, you know, I should have. And honestly, I think it could be that we have to ask more nuanced questions around like maybe your dinner time conversations have changed, maybe what you talk in the car has changed,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the kinds of opportunities you go to have changed, which we actually have data for. But just the fact that they don't do the hands-on project doesn't mean that their attitudes haven't changed. And so try not to make the parents feel bad.
Yeah.
Right. I thought that was it's only now that after so many years. And then I think go ahead.
And for them to be able to give you feedback too, like you also kind of have to have that trust or have the right person asking the parents for feedback, because it's like, otherwise, like you said, like they're going to feel bad saying that they don't use it, or like,
Yep.
you know, like that they're a
It
bad
was just a survey though. I think the thing that we have learned is that many times these questions and things, like you don't really spend time thinking about it yourself. So you'll say, yes, I want to do this. And so some of these like responses are quite off from the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, don't they say like, if you'd ask people what kind of sort of locomotion device would you want, they would have said a faster horse, right? So I think some of this is us just developing the expertise and sort of seeing what doesn't work. But it has been interesting, like approach it from a very positive, celebrate the parent.
Yeah.
And all of us want to be celebrated, right? Yeah. And then give them some small strategies. Yeah.
Right. And thinking about kind of like sprinkling in little extra things. So it's like, so that programs don't have to think like I need to do tons of things, but it's like, you know, getting the parents to maybe like go to the library and get an extra book, or,
yep.
you know, if there's one thing on the internet to be able to take advantage of, or that question, especially in car rides, because like that's often a captive audience. So it is thinking about those lighter touch ideas to support families.
I think one other thing that I feel we've missed many times is just in sort of the program logistical mode is we want families to sign up. Here's your flyer. Here's what you get. You're going to get free pizza and raffles and whatever, right? And I think we forget to put a line that says why this is important. Like the short-term benefits, maybe you get to spend time with your family, like building and learning together and having fun. And then the long-term benefits, right? Like, I don't think we say it in all our assessment impact reports to the funder, but I don't think we communicated it to the parent in the flyer, right? And I think that one that's something that we are grappling with now. And then I think the other piece that we are learning is that dosage really matters. Like 10 hours is not going to change anybody's life. 1 hour definitely not change anybody's life. And then for anything long-term, you have to definitely have a clear goal. And I think that's what we missed in our Curiosity Machine work, where yes, aerospace engineering is interesting, mechanical engineering is interesting, but if it doesn't help me understand sort of the larger picture, then I'm not going to spend 15, 20, 30 weeks on this. So that has been something that I feel that there are so many after-school programs where the dosage is very limited. And it's probably not going to come next year. So you're not going to make any kind of change.
And sometimes for those events, the dosage is little and so many resources are put into that. So like it's the end of programs.
Yep.
Celebration, and you'll hear from an organization like, oh my gosh, like our staff put so much time into planning that and not that many families came. Or even if they came, it was just like for an hour or two. So kind of also rethinking like, family engagement is more different from that. And then your comment too, I wanted to go back to in terms of like inviting families or like flyers. And also like, one thing I heard from one dad was that, we did multiple ways of reaching out to families, with the girls like making a personal invitation and, texting. And, but we also did phone calls, like each parent got a phone call. And that, one dad shared with me, like, he would get the flyers and he'd feel like it wasn't for him. And like, I couldn't quite wrap my head around what that meant, but he just never felt like the flyer that said families are invited. He didn't feel like we really wanted him. But when he got that phone call from us, and then when we talked to him when he got there, it was like, oh, he needed more to be able to connect. So like, for me, that was an important reminder that those phone calls are important. And this, I just wanted to share, this book had an interesting idea in terms of like, besides doing phone calls to families pre-event, what's really interesting was that this guy, Stephen Constantino, talks about like after events, they do phone calls to families. And sometimes it's to families who don't attend. And it's not that they're trying to say like, oh, why didn't you come or anything like that? But it was just to like, understand and be able to share, like, these were some of the things that we shared that you might be interested in knowing about. So
interesting.
Families to support them.
It's
and then
teasing them to come back. Oh, come.
Right. Or to be able to take advantage, even if they couldn't be there that night. And then sometimes in the process of learning something about like what was the barrier, or just having that relationship. And I thought, that's really interesting. I never would have thought about having any follow-up calls after an event, either for people who showed up or didn't show up. And, with the ones that showed up, it could be a few phone calls just to thank them for having come. And it's just kind of a new way of thinking about more touch points with parents and kind of building that relationship.
And I think, my mind always goes to, is this possible to do at scale, right? And I think what we have found, we primarily work with partners, and many of them are school partners, and they have these automatic text messaging, text reminders. And so this could be such a simple way to put in a meaty strategy rather than, reminder, come next week kind of a thing.
Yeah.
One other piece that was interesting to me in the research that I did on parental engagement, we did that for an NSF grant that we were writing, that sometimes some of these families may need some guidance on time management. I thought that was very interesting because I guess more affluent families actually have to juggle quite a bit, maybe through work, both parents are working. And so you develop these skills, right? And you have access to technology tools, your Google Calendar gets synced and stuff like that. And so that was a recommendation, that give them tools. And we used to do this earlier, where we used to print out the month calendar and mark off the Curiosity Machine dates. but it could be kind of interesting to provide tools where families can manage their time and other programs.
Mhm.
So what, do we want to switch gears? Shelley, did you want to?
Well, I'm learning a lot, and I certainly know from my communications work that there's an assumption that one letter or one flyer or one email is somehow going to connect, and it probably, my experience is it takes at least 6 or 7 notices of something for it to really sink in. And I think that a lot of people, and I know it's true for a lot of the teachers that I've interacted in my children's school career, is, oh, we tried that.
Mhm.
You know, we tried that and it didn't work. Nobody came. And it was really just like one thing that they did. And it was one little line in a school-wide, bulletin. And they think, oh, we did that. We invited people and we didn't get a response. And then that just kind of becomes this anecdote that shuts down any kind of future engagement. So I'm hearing what you're talking about in terms of, you gotta come at it from every way. You can't
You got to
give
really
up.
care.
Yeah, and you do. And you actually do have to care.
That's the first thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do have to actually want them to participate. I guess I'm curious. I just want to bring it back to maybe to engineering just a tiny bit. Like, what is it about family engagement that really either engineering activities are a good fit for families connecting together, or what are the ways in which families being involved makes that more powerful for the students?
That hands-on experience in the engineer design process is like so well suited for family engagement that, it's that chance to, like, you don't have to have the answers or, like, have a lot of expertise in college to be able to do the design challenges and, like, jump in, and, like, parents and children together can, like, well engage kind of on an even playing field as they're, like, designing and testing and revising their work. So, like, when I've seen families, working on that together, it seems like it kind of breaks down the barriers of families, like, stepping up and, like, not being afraid of engaging in a hands-on kind of way, and then taking away the enthusiasm for engineering and wanting to do more with their kids around it.
I think what we have seen, that it's such a special bonding experience because it's sort of outside of the home. You don't have to worry about food or whatever. And so you're just focused on learning something and doing something with your hands. And so unlike a lot of, I guess, coding, computer science types of activities where the laptop screen can be actually quite a barrier, right? Like when you have people around, but a hands-on kinds of environment is very open. It fosters discussion. What we have found works really well is that the children bring curiosity and absolutely no fear of failure. And the parents bring the maturity of when it is going to fail, how do you deal with that failure? And so we always see the parent being awestruck by the child's enthusiasm and just creativity, and then working together as a team. And then the kid is always so excited to say, I've never seen my mom learn with me, right? Like, so that piece of switching the roles is something that the kids really appreciate. And so I think that collaborative learning is, engineering and hands-on learning, which is slightly different from making, right? Because making, I feel, actually, you may not even have like a clear end goal and a clear test, where for an engineering design challenge, it has to accomplish a certain thing, and you need to have some understanding of the principles underlying it. And so there is a clear kind of the many ways to get at it, but if you don't make your paper airplane correctly, it will not fly. And so it's different from a origami kind of project, right? Like, so So I think there's some element of like an exciting goal, and you're working together to get it to work, right? So I think engineering has that kind of suspense and drama built into it.
This was fantastic. It was a wonderful learning opportunity for me, and I'm glad that we were able to find ourselves all in the same virtual space at the right time. So I want to thank Tara and Linda for joining us today, and I encourage you to check out linkengineering.org. So thank you so much, Tara and Linda. I'm glad you could join us.
Likewise, thanks for having us.